Welcome, everyone. You know the drill by now. I'm going to get the closed captions up and running. And when those come up, you'll see a little red live box, and you can click on that to follow along with closed captions. All right, that should be up and running. So welcome everyone to a special lunchtime webinar. This one was planned by the Public Interest Law Section Immigration Workgroup. So I'm going to put the link to that in the chat once we get going. If you're not a member of the Public Interest Law Section, I definitely encourage you to join and get involved in whichever work group fits your fancy. The Immigration Workgroup is chaired by Laura Pichardo-Cruz, who is the Executive Director of the Hope Community Center in Apopka. And I'm going to put her email in the chat in case you have questions about the work group. And so today we're going to be learning about changes in temporary protected status. And our speaker today is an immigration expert you probably all know by now, Ana Bernal Roberts, and she is an attorney at the Legal Aid Society of the Orange County Bar Association. And I'm Christy Baglow, by the way, for anyone who has not been tired of seeing my face this year so far. But welcome everyone, and I will let Ana take it away.
Good morning, everybody. I am going to be talking about temporary protected status. So what is temporary protected status? So the Secretary of Homeland Security may designate a foreign country for TPS due to conditions in the country that temporarily prevent the country's nationals from returning safely to that country. In certain circumstances, there must also be a request from the country for TPS and determination that the country is unable to handle their return of its nationals adequately. So the background of TPS, it was created by the Immigration Act of 1990, and then Congress sought to provide protection to people who fear returning to their home countries for reasons other than prosecution. So the laws and regulations can be found at INA section 244, 8 CFR section 244 through 244.9. So designation of a country for TPS. A country may be designated for TPS due to the following temporary conditions in the country. There could be ongoing armed conflicts such as a civil war, an environmental disaster such as an earthquake or hurricane. That happened in Haiti years back. Or an epidemic, or other extraordinary and temporary conditions. An initial or redesignation remains in effect for 6 to 18 months, depending on the Secretary of Homeland Security's discretion. So when they decide to give a country a TPS, they usually do it for 6 months, it could be 12 months, it could be 18 months. And then at the expiration of each of those periods, they decided they need to keep extending it or not. So before the conclusion of the designation period, the Secretary determines whether to extend TPS for another period of 6, 12, or 18 months. TPS beneficiaries. So TPS beneficiaries have the following rights. They are not removable from the US. They can obtain employment authorization, and they may be granted travel authorization, cannot be detained by DHS on the basis of their immigration status in the US. So this is a really great benefit for people who are here trying to work and live without the fear of deportation. So these are the countries that are currently designated for TPS. Venezuela is a new country that has never had TPS in the past. Haiti, who's had TPS for many, many years, but it was actually just recently designated. And then the other ones are Burma, El Salvador, Honduras, Nepal, Nicaragua, Somalia, South Sudan, Sudan, Syria, and Yemen. So I'm going to be focusing on Venezuela during this presentation, and I'm also going to be talking about Haiti at the end. For the purpose of this presentation. When I discuss those countries, each country is going to have different registration periods and like the deadline to apply. But then the eligibility for each country is going to be the same. So like they're all going to have, proof that they are from that country and proof that they entered by that date designated for each country. So each country has different dates that they must have been in the US. Each country has a registration period. But besides that being different, the rest for you to be able to qualify is going to be the same. So I'm not going to, once I hit to Haiti, I'm not going to, restate what I've already stated for Venezuela. Venezuela is a little different in the fact that Venezuelans can also, they also have DED. So it's on January 19, 2021, former President Trump issued a memorandum providing DED and employment authorization for eligible Venezuelans who were present in the United States as of January 20, 2021. So DED is very similar to TPS, except you don't have to apply for it. You are automatically just given this just because you're from Venezuela. But if you want a work permit, you have to apply for that. TPS is different because you actually have to apply for TPS. So former President Trump gave DED to all of Venezuelans, and they automatically just qualify for DED if they were present in the US on January 20th, 2021. To be eligible, a person must be a national of Venezuela or someone without nationality who last resided in Venezuela, who was present in the US as of January 20, 2021, and has continuously resided in the US since January 20, 2021. Persons not covered under DED. These are the people who have voluntarily returned to Venezuela or their last habitual residence outside the US, who have not continuously resided in the US since January 20, 2021. So even if they were here on that date, if they haven't really been living here since then, they've been living in other countries during that time, then they wouldn't qualify. Who are inadmissible under Section 212A3 of the Immigration and Nationality Act, and who have been convicted of a felony or 2 or more misdemeanors committed in the US, or who meet the criteria set forth in Section 208B2A of the INA USC 158B2A. Anyway, so those are the regulations, those are the laws if you want to look at that and see what is covered under those. But I'm not going to specify exactly what's in those sections. Just know that some people will not qualify for DED based on that. I guess it continues to more people who are not covered under DED are those who were deported, excluded, or removed before January 20, 2021, who are subject to extradition, whose presence in the US, the Secretary of Homeland Security has determined is not in the best interest of the US or presents a danger to public safety, or whose presence in the US, the Secretary of State has reasonable grounds to believe would have potentially serious adverse foreign policy consequences for the United States. So what is the required documentation for DED? So there's no application for DED. It's automatically given to you. However, to obtain employment authorization, applicants will need to submit a form I-765 with proof of identity, nationality, and eligibility for DED. So examples of documents that can establish nationality and identity are passport from Venezuela, certificate of citizenship, nationality, birth certificate with photo ID, or any national identity document from the applicant's home country bearing photo and/or fingerprint. Examples of documents that establish presence and continuous residence is the passport, because the passport will have stamps of entries, right? So passport entries, when you enter the country, the US, you're given a form I-94. Actually, you're no longer given this form. It used to be this physical little tiny stamp that you would keep in your passport, but now you're not actually given I-94, but you can always get it by searching it. So as long as you put your name, date of birth, and passport number and certain information, you are able to then pull it up and print it so that you can have proof of when your entry was. You can also submit employment records, rent receipts, utility bills, or letters from companies showing dates when the applicant received service, birth certificate of children born in the US, Social Security card, bank books with detailed transactions, selective service card, and affidavits stating that you have been here since that date. So Now I'm going to talk about temporary protected status for Venezuelans, which is different from DED. So TPS allows certain Venezuelan nationals or people without nationality who last resided in Venezuela, who are already in the US, to remain in the US because of extraordinary and temporary conditions in Venezuela. So on March 9, 2021, the Department of Homeland Security designated Venezuela for TPS for 18 months. On August 4th, 2021, DHS extended the initial registration period because initially you only had 6 months to apply. So now the registration period was extended all the way through the end of September 9, 2022. So people from Venezuela that want to apply for TPS, the registration period started in March 9, 2021, and it ends September 9, 2022. And it's designated through September 9, 2022, which means that at that point, the secretary can decide to extend it depending on the conditions of the country, like what's happening in Venezuela, that they still need protection. And at that point, it's decided whether it's going to be extended or not. And like I said before, it could be 6 months, 12 months, or 18 months that they keep extending this benefit. Eligibility that individuals must meet the following requirements to be able to apply for TPS: a national of Venezuela or an individual without nationality who last resided in Venezuela, continuously physical presence in the US beginning on March 9th, 2021, and continuously resided in the United States since March 8, 2021. This is so confusing because it's just one day difference. So I always just say March 8, 2021. So these requirements are going to be similar to DED, so it sounds repetitive, but the dates are different, as you see. DED, you had to be here in January of 2021. For TPS, it's March 8th, 2021. To apply for TPS, a person must file Form I-821, which is an application for temporary protected status, along with evidence of identity and nationality, evidence of date of entry to the US, and evidence of continuous physical presence and continuous residence in the US. That form can be found at uscis.gov. Applicants are not eligible for TPS if they have been convicted of a felony or 2 or more misdemeanors committed in the US, are found inadmissible as an immigrant under applicable grounds in INA Section 212A, including non-waivable criminal and security-related grounds, are subject to any of the mandatory bars to asylum, or fail to meet the continuous physical presence and continuous residence in the US requirements. So the first thing when you're applying for TPS, you need to show that your client is a Venezuelan national. If someone is applying as a national of Venezuela, he or she must submit evidence. Then the main thing that you would use, which is, it would be a Venezuelan passport. But that's not the only thing that you can, but that's the best evidence that you would have to prove that. Continuous residence and continuous physical presence. So they must have been continuously physically present in the US since March 9th of 2021, must have continuously resided in the US since March 8, 2021. Absences from the US that are brief, casual, and innocent are acceptable and do not break either continuous residence or continuous physical presence. And an absence that is due to a brief temporary trip abroad required by emergency outside the control of the applicant also does not break CR or CPP. Evidence to show continuous physical presence. So you could have copies of passport pages with non-immigrant visa, admission or parole stamps, your income tax records, utility bills, birth, marriage, and death certificates for immediate family members, bank records, school records, grounds of inadmissibility. To qualify for TPS, an applicant must be admissible to the United States. If an applicant is inadmissible, the law may allow him or her to apply for a waiver that can overcome the grounds of inadmissibility. So some of those grounds I discussed before when I was talking about DED. So like if you committed certain crimes, etc., that may make you ineligible. And some crimes are not waivable, but some are, but you would have to apply for a waiver. And the form is I-601, I believe. How to apply for TPS? So if a person is currently in the US and meets the eligibility requirements, he or she will file Form I-821 to apply for TPS. The required form has a fee of $50. And then a biometrics fee, which is like a fingerprint service that USCIS does to get your fingerprints, is $85. So when you, for applicants 14 years of age and older. So when you apply, you have to not just send the 50, you have to add the $85 to that fee. And that fee for the fingerprints is different depending on the age. So this is for 14 years of age and older. TPS applicants may also file Form I-765, which is application for employment authorization. The fee is $410 for applicants between 14 and 65 years of age. And you can find all these forms at www.uscis.gov. So not everybody's going to need to apply for employment authorization. So a lot of Venezuelans have already applied for asylum. And when you apply for asylum, you are also able to get a work permit. And so a lot of my clients that I've helped with TPS already have work permit authorizations through the asylum process, and they're waiting to see what happens with their asylum case. But then they also want to apply for TPS because they don't know if asylum will get approved, right? So they don't know if they're going to get an approval in that case. So they want to also apply for TPS, and there's no reason to then pay a fee to apply for their work permit when they already have one. Now, in cases where there's no asylum pending and they don't have a work permit, then they can go ahead and pay the extra fee and file that extra form I-765 to get a work authorization. Additional forms that can be filed: Form I-131, application for travel, is an optional form. That's for people that want to be able to travel in and out of the US while their application is pending. The filing fee is $575. And CBP determines whether to admit the applicant for admission at the port of entry. So I always tell my clients that that's their choice if they want to travel, but I never encourage it because I can never promise them if they will be allowed back in once they try to enter the country. And like I said before, Form I-765 application for employment authorization may be submitted with Form I-821. And it could also be submitted while Form I-821 is pending, or even after Form I-821 is approved. So if you decided you don't want to apply for a work permit and because you think you don't need it, you can always apply afterwards. But if submitting the Form I-765 after filing for TPS, an applicant must include proof that his or her Form I-821 for TPS is pending or approved. And you can prove that because when you apply for TPS, you get a Form I-797 receipt notice that says, hey, we've received your case and we're processing it. Or when TPS is approved, you would get a notice saying your TPS has been approved. So you would have that form that when you file for a work permit, you can submit a copy of it to show USCIS that you have that either pending or approved and you qualify to apply for a work permit. So family members. Each person seeking TPS must apply on a separate Form I-821. So I have a client ask me, well, I want to apply for TPS and I want to include all my children and my husband, and it doesn't work like that. Each person has to have a separate I-821. So it's basically, if you have 4 kids and a husband, then I'm looking at 6 different cases for TPS. There's no derivative TPS status, meaning a person's spouse, children, or parents cannot obtain TPS as a result of someone else's approved TPS. So the benefits of TPS status, TPS beneficiaries are authorized to remain in the US. They may obtain employment authorization. If DHS does not extend TPS or a recipient does not maintain status, he or she will revert to the same immigrant status he or she had before TPS, or to any other status he or she may have acquired while registered for TPS. So while you have TPS status, you could have at that point gotten asylum approved, and now you have that, or you may have applied for something else. You might have got married to a U.S. citizen and applied for that. So just because you have TPS or you have asylum pending does not mean that you can't apply for other benefits that you may qualify for. So once TPS is not extended, you are then brought back to whatever immigrant status you would have had before the TPS was granted, or whatever you obtain during that process. Also, so TPS versus DED. So what is the difference? Should Venezuelans apply for TPS if they automatically have DED? So TPS versus DED, employment authorization documents issued under DED will expire on July 20, 2022. Employment authorizations documents under TPS will expire September 9, 2022. It's only 2 months, right? But there's no guarantee that DED will be extended, even if TPS may be extended. So it's recommended that even if Venezuelans are presently covered by DED, that they apply for TPS. Because we have no idea with DED, it may just be over in July, right, of 2022. So TPS will most likely keep getting extended until the conditions in Venezuela get better. So there's no reason why people from Venezuela should not apply for TPS. So I'm also going to mention Haiti because they just had a new designation. People from Haiti have had TPS for many, many years, and then at one point it was supposed to end, and there's been so much court injunctions and court battles that have been extending Haiti, and they've kind of been in limbo, but as of recently, it has been redesignated. So the registration period for Haiti is started on August 3, 2021, and it ends February 3, 2023. So TPS with this new designation is designated through February 3, 2023. And they must establish continuous residence in the US since July 29, 2021. So see, the date's different than from Venezuela, which is March of 2021. So for Haiti new designation, they have to have been here since July 29, 2021, continuous physical presence in the US since August 3, 2021. Okay. For the Haiti current beneficiaries, the ones that had TPS in the past, and who have TPS has been continued by court orders, are encouraged to register under the new Haiti designation to help ensure that they will have TPS if eligible should the court injunction end. And that was it for my presentation on TPS. If there are any questions at this point, I will take any.
All right, thank you for a great presentation, Ana. We did have some questions come through. Let me just dig through the chat to find them. And I promise CLE will get approved eventually. I guess they had a flurry of applications in the last few weeks, so it's delayed a little bit. So someone asked if DED expires, which I think you mentioned, but it might be worth repeating.
Yeah, it does. And let me see if I find when it expires. So DED will expire July 20, 2022.
Okay. And we'll wait a couple minutes for more questions to come in. I will send out the recording and the PowerPoint tomorrow. And then I also posted in the chat the information about how to join the public interest law section and specifically the immigration work group. I also posted Monday's webinar that you might be interested in about non-citizen veterans and the naturalization process. So I'm looking forward to that. I posted the link to register, and I'll also include that in the follow-up email. Is everyone being shy today with questions? I think you just did such a good job. Like you went through slowly and clearly, and it all made sense.
Okay, good.
All right, well then I guess we get out of class early today and you can go enjoy your lunch. So thank you everyone for attending, and thank you, Ana, so much for the update.
Thank you.
Have a great afternoon, everybody. Bye-bye.